Hey, welcome back to us again. And I was literally thinking, Bobby, exactly what you just mentioned to me just a second ago. I was watching the folks up here singing. You had Christina, then you had Juan, and you had Trey, and then on that far side was a guy named Jake. That's Jake Wood. You want to tell everybody what's going on real quick?
We just wanted to point out, and I think Jake's in the back. Jake was in a really, really bad car wreck not too long ago, if I remember correctly, 2 to 3 weeks ago, and it's a miracle that he is here. If you've seen the pictures, and so we just want to recognize the fact that one, he's with us. Two, is that he is leading worship, which is crazy. If you know Jake, there you are. We love you. If you know Jake, you know his heart for God. And I will say that right after the wreck, he showed up on Sunday morning, that next Sunday, and he was like, I can sit and lead worship. I can still sing, and it just shows your heart. And we're just thankful for you. And just we wanted to recognize, because it does my heart good to see just how God is working in your life, and that you continue to allow Him to use you. So we love you.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it, buddy. So then there's no way to get into this.
Not from that.
There's no way to get into this, but we will. But we will. There are times in my life, maybe even the last few hours, and maybe the last few days, where I'm doing something that it feels like it's a waste of my time. Right? Like one of those actually literally happened last night because I was wanting to go to the soccer game, but was unwilling to sit through 2.5 hour rain delay to sit through the soccer game. So, and I felt like it was a waste of time, getting ready for the soccer game and then not going to the soccer game. But I went to sleep early, so I was really happy about that. But have you ever done anything in your life that's a waste of time? And yeah, I know you're going to be honest, so go ahead and say it.
Well, I'm always honest, right? I would say, and we joke around with this a lot, any conversation or meeting that is you and me, because we get in all these rabbit trails and squirrels are to be had, and it takes us like what should take us 15 minutes of a conversation. 2.5 hours later, we're like, oh, where did we begin? Where were we supposed to be talking about?
That literally happened Thursday, right?
It literally happened Thursday. Your lovely, amazing wife was like, oh, you're still meeting? And we're like, well, the meeting's been over for like an hour. Or I would say the other thing that seems meaningless and on a constant in my life is, do you ever go over in your family and have you have 10,000 things on your to-do list or your schedule, and you come together on Sunday evening and you go over what's ahead, who needs to be where? I mean, we have 3 kids, 2 churches, and so we're like, okay, you need to be here that day. Can you help with this? Can you help with that? And then fast forward to just the next day, and he's asking, where do I need to go? Where do I need to be? And then again the next day, where did you say I needed to be at? And you're like, why did we have that conversation to begin with? It feels completely and utterly meaningless.
At times, I've tried to put stuff on a board at my house so I'll remember. But if you don't look at the board, it doesn't.
It's meaningless. We have that too, and he doesn't look at the board.
Yeah. It doesn't mean. So I'm gonna date myself, and I see a few of you in here.
No one's gonna know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I guarantee you, there's gonna be at least 15% of this congregation, and those online that will know what I'm talking about. When I think of something meaningless, I think of the 1985 to 1986 television calendar.
I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, television calendar, 85, 86. The series Dallas.
Does anybody remember Dallas?
See, I told you.
Okay, only like a third of the room.
All right, so for all of you people who are way younger than the rest of us, the 1985-86 season ended up being a whole dream by Victoria Principal, the redhead actor, I forget her name, in there. She dreamed the whole thing because her husband, Patrick Duffy, was wanting to leave Dallas. And he changed his mind after the season. And so to get Patrick back on the show, they had to dream that whole season. So they rebooted the whole. So literally the 85-86 season was meaningless. All right. So some of you, I'm getting ready to offend some of you younger crowd, but I think another meaningless TV series was the last season of Lost. I think that's true because my kids watched it. I really didn't get into it, but you felt lost the whole last season of Lost because everything that was going on. So that's that.
You and your dad jokes.
Yeah, I know. So, but really, we do things each and every day that we look back and go, that really was meaningless, right? I think watering the grass is meaningless, truthfully, because it just grows. Then I got to cut it, and I got to do the whole thing again. That's just my opinion. So, but the word meaningless is our topic today, and we've actually had one of our staff members say, "Oh, this week is the meaningless sermon." So that's what they called it.
It's legit the name of it this week.
So, what's that word? Where'd we get that word? I mean, it's up on the screen, so obviously you're looking at it.
Obviously, it means something.
But where'd that come from?
Well, okay, so we're walking through Ecclesiastes, and if you've read it, and hopefully you have, it's only 12 chapters, but you'll notice that the two teachers, FYI, there's actually two teachers in Ecclesiastes. You notice that they talk about meaningless over and over and over and over again. And specifically, they talk about the Hebrew word hevel. And in this, it's this idea that everything ends in a vapor or mist, that everything comes and goes. The sun goes up and the sun goes down each and every day. And it feels like there's no constant to be had. And he even goes on to talk about that generations come and generations go. And so life in itself is fleeting, and there's no meaning if in the end of it all, it comes and goes on a regular basis. And so he centers around this idea throughout the majority of Ecclesiastes is that, well, he says it in chapter 1. Meaningless, 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 says the teacher. He goes on to say utterly meaningless. So he doesn't just say meaningless, meaningless. He goes, it's utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless because it always centers around this idea. What's the meaning of anything if we end up in vapor and mist? Or if you take it in biblical terms, if we end back into dust, right?
And that's not the only thing that they repeat over and over again. The teacher is who is talking here. The teacher says. He mentions the phrase under the sun almost as many times as the word meaningless is mentioned. And when he uses that phrase under the sun, 28 to 32 times, depending on how you count it, he's literally talking about our earthly existence. Here, we're living our life out here and now. And really what he's getting at is the fact that under the sun is something we want in our lives. We want to control. It's what we want. It's what we desire. It's what we need under the sun. Everything. And we do have that desire in our lives that we want to control. That we want to control every part of our life under the sun. This is where we are living. This is where we're breathing. This is where we're existing. And we want to control everything there. And so the teacher's saying, okay, you're doing all this. You're striving for all this. And Bobbi and I have found 4 areas that the teacher points out that under the sun, you're striving for these 4 areas. There's other stuff mixed in there, but we're just going to highlight 4 today. You can read and pick out a couple of other ones, but the teacher says there's 4 things. And the first one, I was going over these 4 ones. I said, the first one, Bobbi, it's on you, because I really feel like it seems like, and maybe I think this is fact. I think you've actually been in school over half of your life. Isn't that?
I feel like that's a jab.
Is a jab?
I feel, yes, but no, I have been. It's is age bring you more wisdom? Does schooling bring you more wisdom? And I think we decided that I could talk about wisdom isn't because I'm actually wiser, is that I've walked through this need for control, right? So when you start to believe that everything is meaningless, why am I doing the things that I'm doing if they have no meaning, if they don't change anything, if there's no difference to be had, and it comes and goes with the sun? You then can go two different ways. One is that you can go the way in which you just don't do anything and you cease to really do anything in life, or you can go typically the way I go, where it drives my husband bonkers, is that I go into control mode, this need to control everything. And so I did that so fun fact, when you get into ministry at a young age, and most churches that we've been a part of is that the older generation is the majority of the church. And when you come in as a young buck, that they look at you and they're like, well, you're the age of my granddaughter. I don't know, like, do you have much wisdom for me to gain? And so I got in this thought process, okay, well, I'm going to go to school as long as I possibly can and get all of the different degrees so that I have all the knowledge that I can be able to say, well, listen, I know this and I know that, and I think you should do this and I think you should do that. But the problem is that what we realize when we pursue wisdom in this way, through our own pursuit under the SUN, it's not the wisdom that the book actually talks about and actually guides us to. It's not the wisdom that God is asking us to have. That wisdom comes from our experiences with him and how we see him be faithful within our own lives. And so when I was just starting off with ministry and I had a AA degree, a undergrad degree, a master's in youth ministry, and now an equivalent of a master's in divinity, I was like, I got this. I can do things. But you know how many missteps I've made? Because I relied on that knowledge and wisdom. And it's not really until the past 2-3 years that I've started to gain the wisdom that is found later on in the book that he talks about. But I pursued so much what I wanted and I thought deemed necessary. And that's what he warns us about, that when we do that, it does feel meaningless, right? So there's a second one that he talks about and says that we continue to pursue on under the SUN. And what is that?
Oh, it's the pursuit of pleasure. Pursuit of pleasure. And I thought about this a little bit because, I keep grandkids every so often, and I thought that's exactly what we do with these kids. We don't bring them in for 2 or 3 hours. We're keeping them for whatever reason. We don't come in and try to impart anything on them. We don't try to teach them. We just try to keep them from getting hurt and having fun. I mean, that's all we want to do. We don't get hurt on our watch, and we do everything we can to have fun. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And so it's really all about what they want. It's not about what we want, right? And so the pleasure passage that he brings up is chapter 2. He says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. So the teacher is saying, I'm going to test myself, okay? Whatever's good, I'm going to test myself to find out what is good. And then he said, but that also proved to be meaningless. And what he did is and when you read chapter 2, he tried wine, he tried folly. I don't know what folly is.
You should have looked it up in between services.
He embraced folly. I don't know. So he planted vineyards so he'd have plenty of wine, basically. And then he made gardens and parks and these pools. And then he also had slaves to help him do things. And then he acquired male and female singers. It's almost like he had a Justin Timberlake, Taylor Swift concert all the time. That's what he had, right?
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can imagine. Notice I didn't pair Timberlake with Janet Jackson. Anyway, so we had
Gatlin.
So I heard one sigh back there going, why do you say that? All right. So then he had a harem. This dude had a harem as well. So a lot of times we think Solomon is the writer of this, but it's never actually clear. but it's a Solomon-like character that had plenty of options to do things. But he said this, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. I denied myself nothing. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. And when you read this on the surface, here's what we're thinking. All right, he's saying he went after all these things, and he said they're all meaningless. So does that mean then that we should live our lives being bored? That's what we're thinking, because that's really what the world is telling us. Did you know that? The world's saying to us, you believe in Jesus, you follow God, you live a boring life. See, I don't think that. And actually what we're going to find out is the writer of this, the teacher here, is not saying that either. He's just saying in this context of when I was pursuing pleasure, it was meaningless. So there's a context that comes at the end of this, and we're going to be able to look back and go, wait a second, pleasure, there is a space, there is a place for having fun, right? I should know I'm an empty nester. Now I can have fun, right?
That's not fair.
I'm sorry. Is that another jab at you?
Yes.
Is that another jab at you for having 3 kids? So anyway, but as much as I loved having fun when I was a kid and doing things and I didn't really concentrate on school. I mean, I really didn't. I was probably ADD, if there was such a thing back then. I didn't do bad in school, but I didn't ascribe to be the highest of the highest, right? I passed, made decent grades, didn't have to study much and all that stuff, but that was fun. I enjoyed life. I enjoyed being a kid. I enjoyed being a middle schooler. I enjoyed most of high school. Not all of it. I enjoyed most of high school. Eventually, I had to grow up. Eventually, the pursuit of pleasure had to end, and I had to grow up. And most of us, I hope, are on that track, that we figure out, I can have fun for a while, but I need to move to something else. And that is our third pursuit that the teacher taught about, and that is
work. So you talked about the fact that you highlighted that there's 2 mindsets that are talked about in Ecclesiastes. And when we pursue out of our own needs and wants, it's that mindset of self-centeredness. And eventually he gets us to a mindset centered around God. But, it's funny because we were a little bit different in school, is that I had to work my tail off, and that I also was born and raised by a man who, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That was something that was in my life nonstop. And so I have this tendency, and my husband thinks it's innate in me because he says your whole family is the same way, is that we tend to go to that workaholic side. And so, let's be honest for a second. Who really enjoys going to work every single day like that you have to go? Not a single one of you have a hand up. I just want to say that. So it feels like in the majority of life that work does seem meaningless. Like you're working towards having enough money to live. And in reality, not a lot of people are blessed with your passion being what you do to earn money to be able to live. And so we get into this mindset that work is just for the next day, right? That you're just toiling to toil and you're spinning your wheels, and every day is the exact same over and over and over again, and you can kind of predict it. But life is unpredictable and things get thrown at us. And I will say that my workaholicness takes over really big time when life becomes unpredictable, because it's the one thing I feel like I can control, right? And I did that in my early years of ministry, is that I set out to be the best of the best and to be the most knowledgeable, and for no one to ever be able to say that I was a bad youth pastor. Well, let's just say that didn't work out well. Like in reality, when you put more control on, you tend to lose yourself and lose your purpose in life, right? And in that process, I almost lost my family. My husband looked at me and said, if you continue on, I'm walking out the door with the kids because your one priority is everyone else over me. And so work is this thing that can happen within our lives. And he actually goes on to say, Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 17, so I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. And I can tell you that it felt like that over and over and over again, every single day. And I began to question, why am I getting up? Am I making a difference? Or what's the point in all of this? And it's because I was working under the SUN rather than under the SON, which we'll get to in a minute. And so there's another one that he talks about, which I think it connects to work, right? Like a lot of us work to be able to gain the pursuit of our last one.
Most of us have to work to get our wealth.
That's true.
Most of us have to work to, when we get wealth, we're having to work to get that wealth. But the teacher here says, whoever loves money never has enough. Now this teacher, again, he's a Solomon type figure and has plenty. He has way beyond plenty. He has an abundance. He has superabundance. However you want to put it, he had plenty of it. And he realized this: I never had enough. This is a self-admission. Whoever loves money never has enough. He admits he was there. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. He figured that out. He lived it. He basically said, I've got plenty and I want more. I need more. That was his mantra. And he figured out at some point, after looking around at all of his wealth, he said, this is meaningless. And majority of us really identify with this. We may not admit it, but we identify with this. That's why 70% of Americans play the lottery. That's why 70% of Americans gamble. Why? You want more. 50% of the United States citizens have credit card debt. What does credit card debt mean? It basically means we wanted to have more without having to work for it. We wanted more. We didn't have enough, so we can use that credit card to have more because we wanted more. Most of the time it wasn't a need. Most of the time it was a want. We wanted more. And I found an interesting story. Many of us, well, again, we know we're in Southeastern Conference territory, and we know there's one school we hope we get to play every year in football. What's the name of that school? Vanderbilt. Yeah, we want to play Vanderbilt in football every year, right? Because we know we're going to have a really, really good chance of winning that. Well, most of us just think of Vanderbilt as a private school or whatever. The name Vanderbilt goes back to the 1800s. And Cornelius built an empire, railroad industry, transportation stuff. And by the time he died, it was worth $100 million, I think in the 1870s. And his son, Will Henry, inherited it and built it. By the time he died in 1885, Will Henry had built the Vanderbilt fortune to $200 million in 1885. What's that in today's dollars? Between 5 and 6 billion. That's today's dollars. 1885. By the 1960s, you don't hear about it. You don't hear about the wealth of the Vanderbilt family. Now, truthfully, it got split up a lot. A lot of different people inherited. They did a lot of philanthropy things that were great, but it was all gone. Less than 100 years. Less than 100 years, it was gone. And, Solomon actually mentions a little bit about this. He says in 2:18, I hated all the things I had toiled for, understand. He had worked to accumulate wealth. He said, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. I must leave them. Everything I'm working for, I have to leave to somebody else. And And then we have this Vanderbilt story, and so I sort of thinking about it. Okay, how do you build generational wealth? Only have one kid. That's how you build generational wealth.
My kids are.
You can't have more than that because it just divides it up. so we have these things. I wish I could find a W word for pleasure, but I didn't. But so we had wisdom, we had pleasure, we had work, and we had wealth. And the teacher says they're all meaningless. We strive after them, and they're all meaningless. And when you look at it, each one of those individually, you sort of go through the motions on each one of those. And it comes, the word that Bobbi mentioned this week was mundane. A lot of this stuff seems mundane. Over and over again, we're striving after the same things, doing the same things over and over again, with the same result. They're meaningless. Where can we find meaning in the mundane? Well, the teacher throws all this out, but then somebody else commentates at the end of here's the conclusion of the matter. And that's going to be in chapter 12, I believe.
Praise God that they don't leave us in that feeling of everything's meaningless. What's the point? Why are we even here? What are we doing? How do we take the next step? Why would you even take the next step? I'm so glad that that's not where they leave us, because that sometimes feels like that's where we're constantly living. But in reality, what happens is that we get fast forward to chapter 12, verses 13 through 14. It says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. So how do we make meaning out of the meaningless? How do we make meaning out of the mundane? He says it right here after he's listened to everything that the other teacher has said. He goes, it boils down to getting back to the basics. I put it this way, okay, is that have you ever gotten into a car where you're not driving, you're the, what do they call it now, the princess passenger, or, you're along for the ride, but you know exactly where you're going, you've been there 10 billion times, and all of a sudden the person who's driving decides to turn on the blinker before you think that they should turn, and you automatically go, where are you going? And they look at you and they're like, what do you mean where I'm going? I know where I'm going. Are you driving? You're not driving. Can you just sit back and relax? Don't worry. Trust me. I'll get you there. Anybody have that conversation? It happens a lot in our household, right? And what I've appreciated is that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes my husband will get in the car, and as we get into the car, he goes, I just want to prep you for just a second, Bobbi. And he goes, I know where we're going. I know that you've been there. I know that you know how to get there, but guess what? I may go in a different direction than you're expecting. Will you just trust me, lean back, and enjoy the ride? And look out and see the beauty that we pass by, right? Changes my whole perspective and understanding when he has these moments with me. It's the same thing here. This is what I equate to this playing out, is that we go through all of this thinking that life gives us these unpredictable twists and turns, and we're going, God, what are you doing? What is this? What is that? Why are we going this way? How is that? That's not the way to go. I thought we should go this way. In reality, the teacher says, would you sit back and relax? God has already prepped you. He's already told you that I know where we're going. I know how to get there. You may have a different way of getting there, but I know how to get you there. And the way that you prep, or the way that I've prepped you, is this: fear me and keep my commandments. If we remember those two things, we can sit back, relax, and begin to see that there is joy and peace and meaning in the meaningless or the mundane. I think there are some things that keep us from being able to see that and understand that and remember that he's already said this to us, right? We're in the Old Testament. He's already said this to us, is that word fear tends to bring something within us that really isn't what's happening when we say fear God. Because fear God actually means is that get to know him more. Get to know who he is and what he's already done within our lives, what he's already done in the lives before us. Get to know when he says, I am who I am, that he actually means that, and we can stand on that firm foundation of that. And so our fearing him is living in awe and wonder of him. And then when we have that and we center ourselves around him rather than what we think we know to be true within this world, in our life, and our desires, then we can, not out of obligation, keep his commandments, but out of joy and want and willingness and awe, be able to live the life that he's calling us to live. And we can begin to do what the second teacher ends up telling us, that there is meaning in these things, and this is how we get there. So how do we get to all that? We fear God, we keep his commandments, and when we do that, what happens when we get in that mindset?
Yeah, we get in that mindset, and for those of you who are reading on the screen, take out the word duty, and it reads a whole lot better, more original, right? Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is all of mankind. This is who we are. It's not a duty, it's who we are. You see, and if we're being who we are, and who we are is fearing God and keeping his commandments, then we're not worried so much about the next thing, which is, for God will bring every deed into judgment, every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. You see, if we're doing the fearing God and keeping his commandments, we're not worried about the judgment. Now, literally, none of us like to be judged. I mean, fact of the matter is, don't judge me, don't judge me, don't judge me. We don't like being judged. But it is a reality. It is a reality. There is a judgment coming. And I like that the judgment that we're talking about is not an Old Testament judgment. If you read the Old Testament, and those of you reading through with us so far, a lot of the judgment stuff that we've read in the Old Testament so far is happening in real time, right? Somebody does something, boom, God judges them. They ain't around no more, or they're suffering, or something's going up. When they mess up, they do the evil, they're being judged automatically. We read Ecclesiastes, we read the Old Testament through the lens of Jesus. And through Jesus, we have a different perspective on judgment. You see, when we think about Jesus, we do think about, hey, he lived a great life. The life he lived, we model, we teach, we read, we want to emulate. We do all this about the life of Jesus, but then we say, oh, well, we can't forget about his suffering and his torture and his death. But that was just a small part of his life, because then he was resurrected. And we tend to stop at Easter. We tend to stop at Easter and go, he was resurrected. We forget about the ascension. He ascended into heaven. And in one of our famous creeds, he ascended to heaven and is at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. And thence he will come to judge the quick and the dead. So there is a judgment, but that judgment is in front of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 5:10, for we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. And the teacher here, the commentary on the teacher says, everything good and bad, we will be held accountable for. And I don't want us to gloss over the hidden thing, because here's what I want to challenge you on. Every hidden thing. What's that mean? The hidden thing is what you're doing when nobody's looking. What you're thinking, what you're acting out when nobody else sees you, nobody else hears you. That's your true character. And that character is going to be judged. So it's hidden, but is it good or is it evil? And here's the wonderful part of closing this out today, is that we have choices. We have two choices. We live under the sun or under the sun. That's our choice. If you live under the sun, like the Ecclesiastes the teacher was saying, meaningless. But if you live under Jesus, there is meaning. There is meaning. There's a friend of mine who had an encounter, a very close friend who was an atheist. And he was struggling communicating with this atheist because this atheist said basically, man, my life is better than yours. My friend has been a lifelong believer in Jesus Christ. Can't remember a time when he didn't follow Jesus. Going through some difficult times. He's got struggles with his family. He got struggles with some living arrangements and struggles just in living his life right now. And the atheist friend says, "Man, you're following God, and my life's a whole lot better than yours." And my buddy was sort of lamenting the fact. He said, "My God doesn't care about the afterlife. And how can I communicate with him?" And basically I said, here's the deal. Those that are living for under the sun, they're getting their reward now. They get their reward. If you're living under the sun, you're getting your reward, whatever that is. Enjoy it, reap it. For those of us who live under Jesus, we have a better reward. And I hope that we understand that, and I hope that we don't just pay it lip service, but understand that this life is fleeting. We are here but for a vapor. We're only here for a moment. But we have such a wonderful life eternal that is awaiting us. So you live under the sun, S-U-N, have fun, enjoy it. Because that's it. If you live under the sun, it's a little bit different. Has a lot better rewards, long term. You get the last word.
So the question is that what are you pursuing? Are you pursuing a day that ends in vapor? Or are you pursuing a day that ends in eternity? Let us pray. Gracious God, man, it's good to know that there is meaning in the mundane. It's good to know that even though this sun up and sundown day ends in vapor, Lord, you are a living God offering us a life of eternity with you. I thank you for that. I thank you for allowing us the ability to get out of the mindset that nothing matters within this world and that we do matter. We matter to you. We matter to this kingdom. Lord, help us to have the mindset of you and to lay down the mindset of the world at your feet. Lord, would you protect us and guide us as we do this? Open our hearts and minds and souls in those moments where it feels like nothing else matters. Help us to love you and know you more deeply and be able to stand on that firm foundation that you are our purpose. Building this kingdom here on earth is part of our purpose. Loving you and being a part of you and our relationship with you is our purpose. We love you, Lord. Amen. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us.